Welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here, joined by Coach Rainwater as we bring you the first of what we hope is many live Sunday night shows here on OState Daily. Coach, it's been a couple days since I don't know, set the world on fire, I guess is what you could say, with a pretty heated episode last time we were on, but good to see you again, man.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm glad to be back on here. Hopefully didn't run off all your subscribers last week.
No. Hey, yeah. Coach, we speak from the heart, man. We're all fans. We all like to give our opinion. That's why I started this, was to give Oklahoma State fans another platform to come out and not necessarily just dog on everybody and rip everybody and be negative, but hey, let's give our organized thoughts on what we think so we can all just kind of feel better about it, but maybe, sometimes even make things better for everybody, right? So, I mean, that's literally why I started this thing.
Yeah, and trying to be careful not to, we should be running this play or that play or this formation or this personnel group. I try and stay away from the schematic things as far as, what plays should be run or give any kind of opinion like that. What I was trying to voice my opinion on is I think the word you used that summed it up perfectly was the hunger, right? And the drive and the want to, and just the kind of the monotony of what's been the last, 3 ball games or really all season. And so anyway, trying to stay away from, because, as a coach, this as well as anybody that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. And so don't ever want to get into, trying to argue the point of what play should be called and that sort of thing, but just the process on, game day and what that looks like and what it looks like from a fan in the stands and that sort of thing. So anyway, I hope we're OSU's moving in the right direction, and hope that this bye week produces some changes that the fans desperately want to see and get back to some exciting football.
What are some of those changes? If I were to ask you now, not just the fact they need changes, but if you were in charge of this, what of course, it's harder than you think. You only get 2 really tough practices a week. So in this bye week and then the next week, you're going to get 4 practices where you can really institute and implement changes. That's not a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
The rules have changed. So, I think some fans think you can just go to the wishbone with a bye week because you have all this time. It's just really not like that.
Right.
So, yes, maybe the coaches know of all these different changes they need to make, but you being in the coaching realm, what changes need to be made versus what they actually can do in these 2 weeks?
Yeah, and to me, it's the perception, right? And
yes, and
talk a lot about perception is reality, right? Whether it's right or wrong, the way people perceive you is the way people are going to treat you. It doesn't matter if it's in, your professional life or any area of your personal life, whatever the case is that the way that people perceive you is the way people are going to treat you. And it's no different than athletics. Athletics is entertainment business, Coach Porter. You know that as well as I do, right? Mm-hmm. And I keep going back. Absolutely. The thing that in my mind that keep going back to is the movie Gladiator, where he stands in the middle of that arena and says, "Are you not entertained?" Right?
Yeah.
The answer right now is no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's so the perception. What I would like to see, the changes that I would like to see, and what I was trying to get to, last time we talked, was the perception of OSU football. Whether that perception is right or wrong, doesn't matter. People are leaving the stands, right? People are unhappy with the product. People are not satisfied, and they're not being entertained in this entertainment business, because college athletics is a business, and it's the entertainment business, and they're not being entertained. And so for me, it's the perception of what's happening on the sidelines and people being interested in the game and people being bothered when they're not playing well, and that there's a noticeable change in the approach to the game. For me, that's what it is. It's the perception that is being given off that, and I think we ended the last podcast, right? Ended the last podcast on my rant was that it doesn't seem like it's bothering anybody to lose. And that's what I want to see. I want to see a perception change that people after the BYU game, win, lose, or draw, that they walk away from that game feeling better than they did the last game because of the perception they had about OSU football.
And Oklahoma State fans can leave that game. Now, moral victories are a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Leave that back in the 90s. Leave that back to 2005, Mike Gundy's first year. Fine. But, I just got through talking to Greg Gold, who was a running back from 2002 to 2005. Not going to sugarcoat it. He didn't sugarcoat it. He came in as a big recruit, didn't have the type of career that he wanted to have. Having said that, he left Oklahoma State as one of the most proud alumni of this university. He was one of the most outspoken alumni in the Sports Illustration, that debacle. If you remember, Greg Gold was like the one that was saying, no, all these guys are wrong. Oklahoma State didn't do all this kind of stuff. And he didn't have to after, having what I think some people could say maybe not the career that he was hoping to have at Oklahoma State. So I say all that to preface to say he mentioned a great point. And he's an extremely intelligent dude. I'm going to release his interview probably Tuesday. I can't wait. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he said was, no program gets away from having periods of time where you don't win as many games as you want to. OU's gone through it. Texas is out of theirs, but they went through it. I mean, you're looking at Florida right now. Florida State's terrible. Notre Dame had their periods where they were terrible. LSU's going through it. Alabama was terrible when Oklahoma State played them in 2006 in the Independence Bowl. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that stuck out to me the most was, here's a guy that knows the highest level of athletics. That's his take on it. Everybody goes through down periods. Oklahoma State's going to be no different. We're going to have our times where things aren't quite as fun. In those times, though, I think to get to your point, people need to see that there are things being done to ensure at the highest level that all those things get corrected.
Mm-hmm. My immediate thought to that, and he's exactly right, but everybody you just mentioned had bad seasons after they've won national titles and conference championships and multiple Heisman Trophy winners and that sort of thing. We're still trying to get to that level, right? And it just seems, I think the feeling that's out there is we take one step forward last year and then we take two steps backwards this year, right? And it's the feeling of the
same with 2011. It felt like that way.
You're not near as disappointed starting out 3-3 if your previous season you were 500.
Right.
2006, or if going in that it's going to be a rebuilding year or whatever the case is. Because the example you just gave, to me, the difference is a lot of those blue blood programs go through rebuilding, or they don't go through rebuilding years a lot of the times, right? Where programs like OSU may have to go through some rebuilding years after they have a good senior class that loses, or people leave early for the draft, or that sort of thing. The feeling I think that's magnified now is that this wasn't supposed to be the rebuilding year. You come off a good year, start off a little bit slow, but you end in a Big 12 championship game, and you have all these guys coming back, and even having the social media out there with how many guys are coming back, and it hasn't got there, right? So I think it's kind of like, it's like you wake up Christmas morning and you're expecting a certain gift and you don't get it, right? Yeah. And that's I think that's where the feeling and frustration is magnified this year, was because this wasn't supposed to be a rebuilding year. And so anyway, it's just, the thing that I want to see, or I would like to see just personally, is just the perception that is being given off, right? Mm-hmm. That there's a perception, that there's a sense of urgency, that the hunger is back, that there's been a noticeable conversation with multiple players and coaches, that there's an excitement that returns to OSU football, and the fans start getting entertained again by the brand of football that OSU plays.
So instead of trying to win the Big 12 title and making the national playoff, let's try to win this next series. Let's try to win this quarter. Let's try to win this game. I know that sounds very cliche-ish. That sounds coach speak-ish, but that's literally how you get your guys back in the moment to be excited about playing.
Yeah, and the excitement of playing after that those aspirations are probably gone, right? You're not going to be in the Big 12 championship game. You're not going to be in the national playoff. Now what? right? How much do you love this game? How much do you love this university? And how much pride do you have in going out and competing on a down by down basis and a quarter by quarter basis and a half by half basis when you know those preseason goals are gone, right? It's going to be a true bubble of a conglomeration of different things in that fans are frustrated. Your preseason goals are probably out the window, but can you come in this next game and change that perception, even though those preseason goals are gone, and change that perception with this fan base that, yeah, it does bother you to lose. Yeah, we are going to make some changes because what we've been doing hasn't been working, so on and so forth, whatever those changes are. And, I believe that, I know both of us have been Mike Gundy fans. I
no doubt.
Since 1945, half of the winning seasons that have happened at OSU have been when Mike Gundy was here as a player, assistant coach, or a head coach. Okay, and I don't know that you could say that about any other program in the country, that the head coach of the football team currently is responsible for half of the wins when he has been in this program, either as a player or coach, since 1945. I don't think that's a stat that you could say about. It'd be interesting if you could say that about anybody else, and I don't think you could. And so there's no doubt in my mind that Coach Gundy loves OSU, and there's no doubt in my mind that he appreciates the fan base, regardless of the perception that came off in the last interview, right? Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that Coach Gundy is the guy that can get this thing turned around, right? And I think
always has been,
and I think he's been, in a situation where he's been loyal to his guys and defended them, and now they're in an indefensible position, mm-hmm. and something's got to change. And so, and I believe you'll see that. And regardless of how frustrating it is currently, and how disappointing it is that all those preseason goals are already gone, I still think that Coach Gundy is the guy for this program.
Yeah, and Coach Gundy never needs to apologize for anything he's done here. He does not need to apologize for telling the truth. The same way, whereas if we get on our podcast and we give what we perceive to be the truth as fans,
right,
I ain't never apologizing for that, man. I mean, if you think I'm wrong, tell me why, right?
Right.
Show me why. One of those deals.
Yeah, and you talk about whether it's the stadium, whether it's the Sherman Smith Center across the road, whatever it is, all those happened because as huge donors while Mike Gundy was at the helm, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys believed in him, right? Yes. Those guys believed in him to write huge checks.
Yeah,
right?
They're not losers either. There's winners and losers. Those guys, those people are on the winning side,
That's
right?
correct. And they believed that Mike Gundy, Coach Gundy, was the guy for the job in order to invest in this program. And I still believe that, used to 57, what is Coach Gundy, 57, 58, something like that, in his mid to late 50s anyway. That used to seem really old. But now that I'm in my mid to late 40s, 57 doesn't seem so old anymore. You know what I mean? Right. I think he's still got a lot of years to coach this program.
Sure.
And there's nobody else out there. And I truly look, because I've seen some comments and things like that. There's nobody else that I'd rather go out and get to replace Coach Gundy, because those people are going to be here just like anybody else that wasn't an alum. They're going to be here for a short time, then they're on something else, then we're looking for somebody else, right?
Or they're going to be here because nobody else wants them.
Nobody else wants them, right? Or they're in their early 60s and they had a good run in their 40s, but and made a name for themselves, but aren't with the times or whatever the case is.
Miles.
Yeah, and I just think, regardless of the frustration, that he is the man that OSU fans love, right? He's the guy that gets the loudest cheer when you run out of the tunnel, right? He's the guy that can get this turned around, and he's a guy that loves OSU and loves his fan base, regardless of what was said in the last interview. And so I hope, for me, I hope that we see that there's a different perception of OSU football next Saturday or next Friday, whenever the game is, than what that perception has been the last 3 weeks.
I was at a wedding yesterday, and I was talking to some people. Yeah. It was in Allen, Oklahoma, and it was in the middle of a pasture, so it was kind of fun. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Keenan Simon territory for Oklahoma State baseball fans that know all about that. Him and Ede Simon, just a great family there. But anyways, we got to talking, and I heard a really good point from a really big Oklahoma State donor who was there last night. Really big Oklahoma State donor. Okay? And the point is hey, if you have all these seventh-year guys and all these guys that are so old, then why didn't the NFL or any other team want them, right? And I was like, well, he kind of got a point there. Mm-hmm. So his point was maybe the fact that you have a bunch of seventh-year guys coming back isn't a good thing because it means there are people that nobody else wanted at that point, right? I hope that doesn't sound like I'm throwing shade on people, but that got me thinking, like, that makes sense.
Right. Well, and those same guys are competing against a younger version of themselves.
Correct.
That are a year more experienced and a year more mature. Right. Yeah, so it's like you're taking a seventh-year guy, right, and having him compete against a second-year version of himself or a third-year version of himself. And we used to talk about it when I was coaching. There was a certain team that we'd play every year, and every year we'd say they've got everybody back, and it was not a good thing, right? Yeah. Because the point being, whether it's NFL or whatever the case is, that having returners that maybe were injury plagued, because what you don't know about
Cole Birmingham just physically can't do what we want him to do.
And that's the point I was going to get to, is that the people in the stands, what they don't know is, there's injury updates and injury reports, all that kind of stuff. But what they don't know is the nagging stuff that people that are on the field are going through. Right. Yes. And not having all that information. And sometimes, obviously that takes a little bit longer to heal and recuperate or get over, if they ever do, when you're 24 years old versus when you're 19 or 20. And so I think that's a very valid point, that if you've got a bunch of guys that are coming back for their fifth year or sixth year or seventh year like Bowman, and they're able to come back because they don't have a status post OSU, that there might be something to say about that. But to me, that doesn't negate what happened the previous year. Right. Because if it wasn't for Alan Bowman last year, we wouldn't have been in the situation that we were in.
Agreed.
Right. And it's just,
I think you could say, I think it's because they changed the gap scheme. They tricked people. I think you could make that argument.
Yeah. And it's one more year of people watching film on Alan Bowman, because you know as well as I do, when you're playing Arkansas and Bobby Petrino is the head coach, the offensive coordinator again, or whatever the case is, you're playing another team where it's a new head coach. You don't know how to scheme because you don't know what they're going to run. There's not a lot of film on. There's not a lot of film on them. Now, Bobby Petrino's been in it for a long time. You have an idea.
Not with this personnel.
Right, but not with this personnel and not with this quarterback. And I think that same thing you could say about Alan Bowman last year and Ollie Gordon last year.
Great point, Coach.
There wasn't a whole lot of film on these guys, that people could scheme against. But all of a sudden, OSU goes on a run. Alan Bowman makes a name for himself, and Ollie Gordon is the Doak Walker Award winner, and it's publicized that that OSU is going to have this great returning offense again, and all of a sudden you've got 8, 9, 10 games of film on them, whereas the first 3 games of the season you didn't. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. About last year, there was some success there that was partially that nobody knew who Ollie Gordon was. Nobody knew who Alan Bowman was. And now they do, right? Yep. And the frustrating part to OSU, I'll just say me, but I think partly most OSU fans, is that it's almost like the opposing coaches have been one step ahead in scheming against OSU, right? And so anyway, that's I think, and I'll just keep saying it, I think for me, regardless if we improve in the running game or the passing game or whatever the case is let's have baby steps here. We need to change the perception. There needs to be a perception change of OSU football the next time they come on the field.
Exactly. I mean, wins or losses or whatever. I'm telling you, I mean, I'm kind of a savant because I remember all these years, but the average Oklahoma State fan, if I were to say, okay, what was the record in 2008? Right. What bowl do we play in 2008? I would think most Oklahoma State fans probably would have a hard time remembering that, but so, I mean, maybe the overall record itself isn't as important as you're saying as the baby steps towards getting back to where we want to be. So I was watching a little deal on Nick Saban today, and I thought it was really cool. He said with the importance of nothing, right? The importance of nothing. What does nothing mean? Why is that word important? Well, you wake up every day and the world owes you nothing. You go to practice and your coach owes you nothing. If you don't go to practice and work harder than everybody else, then you are going to gain nothing, right? So the speech I would have for all the seventh-year seniors right now is that speech. Guys, I'm going to tell you the importance of what the word nothing actually means in the scenario that we're in right now. It means that this university, yes, you've been great for this university, but it has been great to you too. So every day that you show up to practice, I owe you nothing. I owe the university to put the best players on the field that will show the most amount of progress to get this university and this program back to where it would be. That's the speech I would give them. I would put Rodney Fields Jr. out there from Dell City, who is an absolute stud at running back. I think we're going to see Rangel. And I think we're going to see. And if the older guys want to throw temper tantrums and feel like that they are entitled because they've been here for longer, then get the hell out of here. That's how I would approach that.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that other than you're exactly right. This is a what have you done for me lately society, and it doesn't matter, if it's in your professional life or personal life, or if it's in your entertainment, of what you go and watch for OSU or the expectations you have for the team that you cheer for. It is what have you done for me lately? And if you're not getting it done, next guy up. And, and the other thing that kind of baffles me is these comments about OSU fans are spoiled and need to quit complaining because these, whoever they're making the comment of, I grew up and was, watching OSU in the 70s and through the 90s and blah, blah, blah. Well, the reason why we're upset is because we don't want to go back to that. Right. And that's also a time period where you could literally walk up to Lewis Field 5 minutes before the game.
Remember those little round ticket booths that were on the north side?
And see tickets nailed to a tree that you could pull off and get into the game. Right.
I don't want to go back to those times.
Nobody does. Right. Nobody does. Or you could stand in the west end zone out on the street and look in and watch the ball game because the stadium doesn't look like it does now. Right. I remember when I first started coaching high school, we went down to Plano and Allen, Texas to play. And it was the same year that OSU, this would have been the spring of 2001-ish. And we went down there and played, and they had just passed a $33 million bond issue to build their new football stadium. At the same time, OSU had raised enough money to spray the Rust-Oleum under the stadium. That was before and we were
that
down
was
there.
A major innovation.
We were down there as OSU fans thinking, how is OSU ever going to recruit a kid from Allen, Texas, when they have an indoor football practice facility and they just passed a $33 million bond issue to build a stadium that is twice as much as what OSU just raised just to paint the metal underneath. Those are the days that we haven't forgotten. That's why we're upset, right? Those are the days that we don't want to go back to. That's why we have an expectation, right? I would rather, even though I'm a former season ticket holder, let me clarify that I'm not right now. I'm using some family tickets, but when my son was in Little League football, I was too stupid just to keep them and sell them or whatever the case is and let them go. But anyway, we don't want to go back to the days. I would rather pay $250 for a seat to sit in a ball game or $300 against Utah or whatever, then walk up to the stadium and pull some off the tree that's been nailed there because we're so bad, right? Yeah. And so it's not a spoiled attitude that OSU fans have. There's been a lot of people make a big investment into OSU athletics, and they don't like feeling the perception that's being given off right now about the attitude towards OSU football. And I hope we see a big change in that arena come Friday when we travel to BYU.
BYU is very, very good. They're maybe the best team in the Big 12. They have a very dynamic quarterback. I think it's safe to say that Garrett Rangel will be the starter for Oklahoma State. There's been some pretty dynamic stuff thrown out there as far as rumors go. Of course, the media hasn't really had access to the program this week. There was no press conference, so I can tell you this, everybody's guessing. I've spoken to several of I've shown you the text messages. I've spoken to several people that are very, very, very well inside the program. I do think it's safe to say Garrett Rangel is going to be the starting quarterback. Beyond that, I think bets are off. So we'll see where we go from there. So let me ask you this. I think Garrett Rangel could be Clint Chelfish. I mean, he's a 4'6" guy at the quarterback spot. He has a good enough arm. Let's not forget he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He played at a very high level at Carrollton. I know if you talk to my uncle, who he owns Parks Distributing down there, and I mean and then Parks, actually it's the Parks Coffee Bean. He has his own coffee bean. Very rich guy. But anyways, I say that to say he's connected with a lot of those people. You talk to the people in Carrollton, they'll swear by the guy. This is a guy that has talent. He has enough running ability and a good enough arm. So what can we expect from Garrett Rangel?
Well, I hope, and I said this on briefly discussed this on the last podcast. I hope that the game plan that we have is a game plan that's built around his skill set.
Yes, right.
Okay. That to me, that is going to go a long ways in this perception that I keep talking about OSU football, or the perception that they're going to give off. If we go out there and our expectation is we're just going to throw somebody else out there in the same game plan we've been using,
throw out routes all day,
then it's no good. It's no good, and the perception is going to be the same. I think what needs to happen, in my opinion, whatever it's worth, is that if there is a change at quarterback, if there's a change at running back, if there's a change at receiver, if there's a change at any position, right, it needs to benefit that kid's skill set, right? And that game plan needs to be built around that skill set, not just the same game plan that's saying, because if you're doing that, then what you're saying is it's all Alan Bowman's fault, right? If we don't change the game plan and build it around another skill set, right? What we're saying is all Alan Bowman's fault. We're going to keep going with the same scheme that we've had, or calling the same plays that we've had, and we're just going to throw somebody else out there. That's not what, in my opinion, that's not what needs to happen. It's more
far-reaching than that.
It's a lot more far-reaching than that, in that we need to put, if the change is that we need somebody more mobile, right, so that it opens up a little bit more run game for Ollie Gordon, right? It's not hard to stop a run game when you don't have a mobile quarterback, right? It's really not.
Yeah, you don't have a threat to make if they just key on Ollie, then how do you beat them?
Right. But if you've got a guy that can pull the ball and get 4 or 5 yards himself, now all of a sudden defenses have to change, right? But if we go in there with just the same game plan we've had and it not benefit the skill set of the person that we're replacing, if that happens, then I think that's going to be a huge disappointment. But I would dare say, and I would believe that that if there is a change made at quarterback, okay, you're going to see a different game plan. And I think it'll be a more exciting brand of football, be something that will be more entertaining to watch, right? Losses are going to happen, right? Losses are going to happen, and people can deal with that if there's a entertaining product being produced. And I think that's what you'll see. If there is a change at quarterback, I think you'll see a game plan that more fits his skill set. And I think you'll see a little bit more production out of the backfield for OSU.
So it's not about necessarily the quarterback running the ball 78 times. It's just the fact that I can tell you, like when Oklahoma State runs their pull scheme, Cole Birmingham or whoever is pulling, that 9-tech's just outrunning our pullers, because our pullers, I mean, they're shot physically. They've gone through multiple surgeries, and they're just beating them to the mesh point and just blowing Ollie Gordon up in the backfield, right? Well, that guy can't do that if he just knows that Garrett Rangel can pull the ball and go get 8 yards, right? Those linebackers, both of them can't fit on Ollie Gordon. One of them has to stay home and cover the backside, or the backside safety. There is just an avalanching effect to having just the threat of hitting the backside of a play that will help Ollie Gordon, Rodney Fields, Trent Howland, whoever, Sessi Valahe, who's out there. I'm going to say it again. I really hope that Rodney Fields gets all 4 of his games this year, because I'm telling you, that dude is one of the best high school football players. I'm telling you, we've covered up some dudes at Guthrie High School. Yeah. I mean, like massive NFL I mean, hell, we held Felix Jones to less than 100 yards, right? I mean, there were 2 NFL backs on the same team at Booker T. We've held all the Carl Albert backs to a way fewer yardage than anybody else did, right? Guthrie could not even come close to stopping Rodney Fields. This dude is legit. I hope we see this guy.
Yeah. And I think you started to see a little bit of that at the end of the last ball game, right? With some new guys coming in and that sort of thing. So I don't think it's I don't think by any means, or I would encourage OSU fans that if you do start to see new faces and young faces, that this is not a give up on the 2024 season. This is getting some guys some reps that can come in and make a change for OSU, right? Get some fresh blood in there that can play. This isn't just throwing people out there and giving up on the season. So yeah, all that's going to be very exciting to see how it plays out, and I don't think that in any way, shape, fashion, or form that OSU fans are privy to that or should be privy to that before the game.
Yeah,
but
I think that's a good point.
I think
I wish Mike Gundy would have made this
to me. Yeah. That would be where I would agree if somebody said OSU fan. If you start complaining because you don't have enough information, then you need to calm down.
Exactly.
Slow roll, right? You have every right to be upset and disappointed because the entertainment value isn't there and the expectation has been a disappointment. You have every right to feel that, but you have no right to know the inside information that it goes on in that locker room or in those coaches' offices. That's not your job. That's not your role within this program.
Or the changes that are being made.
Or the changes being made. But if those changes get made and there's a more exciting brand of football that's being played, there's more excitement on the sidelines, there's a little bit more hunger, there's a little bit more drive, there's a little bit more pride about the name that's on the front of your jersey, not the name that's on the back of your jersey, then I think people will be very, very happy. Maybe disappointed going in, but can leave very happy and be encouraged of what the rest of the football season is going to look like. That's what I hope happens, whoever it is, right? And we talk a lot about that in high school athletics, and I think sometimes people may need to be reminded of that in college athletics. You're playing for the name that's on the front of your jersey, not the name that's on the back of your jersey. And I think that probably sums up the ending part of the last podcast of what I was saying was there's been this feeling, right, that there's a certain number of people that are playing for the name that's on the back of their jersey.
Yep.
And that needs to change. That needs to change. And that's the perception I'm talking about, that there needs to be more excitement. There's going to be more enthusiasm. There needs to be more hunger. There needs to be more pride. There needs to be a more want to attitude that will, the byproduct of that will be a more exciting brand of football.
Also, too, Coach, I think Ollie Gordon's the most overall talented offensive player that Oklahoma State's. I do think he's lost maybe a half a step. Now obviously, he's getting hit in the backfield, but I've said that a couple of times. But I think as far as a unit goes, the unit on offense that has the most amount of talent overall, that creates the most amount of mismatches for the other team's defense, is our receivers, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a quarterback that can scramble around, keep their eyes downfield, allow our receivers to maybe use some scramble rules. Now the play's broken down. Now it is a one-on-one matchup. Yeah. Force the defense to have to. Part of the problem with Alan Bowman is the defense only has to cover for like 2 seconds.
Correct.
And he's either getting rid of the ball, or he's throwing it into the stands, or he's throwing it to the other team. Right. So I think Garrett Rangel, more so than just being able to run the ball, if he can just be mobile enough to make the other team have to defend for 5 or 6 seconds on the back end, one of our receivers are going to get open.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And the two-step drop and throw a jump ball, the corners having to cover for the minimum amount of time, and it's giving the safety enough time to come over the top to make a play or break it up or potentially interception, right? You talk about all the time in football that on passes, there's 3 things that can happen, and 2 of them are bad, right?
Yeah.
And like you're saying, the longer that corners have to cover, the greater the possibility that a receiver is going to come open, and just buying that time, whether it's stepping up in the pocket or scrambling or having a rollout play from the very get-go of the play, right? That gives guys the ability to come back to the football or settle down in a zone or open space, to have a higher percentage of chances of completing a pass. And you do those type of things, and then all of a sudden corners got their back turn running with a receiver, and you've got a mobile quarterback, and now he can scramble for 6-7 yards. It just opens up a whole nother dynamic. But going back to what I was saying a while ago, the game plan has to fit that skill set. Right? You can't take a kid that has a different skill set and plug him into the same game plan that has been unsuccessful up to this point and expect that there's going to be different results just because you're putting somebody else at quarterback.
Right, exactly.
If you're going to make that change, then you're making a wholesale change. Right? You're not just making personnel change, you're making a game plan change. And I think you'll see that. And anyway,
I have total confidence in Coach Gundy to make the correct. He always has in the past.
Absolutely.
This is not a witch hunt on our part. This
absolutely
at
not.
all. Not at all.
I can't say it enough how I still think Coach Gundy is the man for OSU. And I think he will be as long as he wants to be. He's earned that. Right?
That's not an apology coming out of your mouth for anything that's been said. That is you making a statement.
That's not me backtracking on anything I've said. But he's still the guy that, if he wants to be, right? And we will see how bad that, or how much it means to the coaching staff and the players on this football team to change that perception, right? Yeah. And if Mike Gundy wants to be the head coach of OSU football, then people need to rally around Mike Gundy. But Mike Gundy's been put in a situation, if you ask me, going back to what I said early on in this podcast, is that he's been very loyal to his guys that he's brought in, and he's defended them, but they have put him in an indefensible position, and he can't defend them anymore.
Yep.
And the conversation that we talked about last time about from the top to bottom, there needs to be a conversation about there needs to be a noticeable change, or you're going to be the change. I'm not backing off that. Okay. And I still think Mike Gundy's the person that can make that change.
I agree. And, one of the things that's hurt our defense is that we've been playing man on the back against mobile quarterbacks. So they, like you mentioned a minute ago, they have their backs turned to the quarterback. Then if we blitz or whatever, and then the rush lane doesn't get to the quarterback, there is no layer left between your rush on your front four, front five, whatever it is, and then your secondary guy. There's this big gap, right? Yeah. So I think that's another aspect that Garrett Rangel could bring, is that I think it forces you to think twice about playing man on the back end, because if he beats your rush and steps out of the pocket, you have this 15 to 20 yard window that your secondary guys can't rally to.
Yeah, and going back to what we was saying earlier in the podcast, there's not a whole lot of game film on this kid.
Yeah, right.
Not a whole lot of game film on this kid.
Hey,
and
guys.
you bring in a new kid that has, I say kid, you change personnel.
They're all kids to me nowadays.
Yeah, and you change. Not only do you change personnel, but you change the game plan that benefits that personnel. There's not a lot of game film on that, right? And that people are BYU's gonna have to scramble during the game to try and make adjustments on who's this kid, where'd he come from, right? Who's this kid that's got Fields on the back of his jersey that just broke one for 20 yards?
Yeah, right.
There's no film on it.
Yeah,
right. And we're going right back to what happened a little bit earlier in this point of the season last year. Of we made a decision on Ollie Gordon and Alan Bowman, and there wasn't a lot of game film on them, right? And you can have that same thing with the benefit of a different game plan, not just the personnel, with new guys on the field that there's not a whole lot of game film on. I think if that changed, I think OSU's got a chance to go upset somebody. They've done it in the past.
Yep.
Right? They've done
Josh Fields against OU, baby.
That's correct. Right? Or Bob Stoops deciding to punt it again to Tyreek, and they've done it before, and it's coming at a perfect time of having a bye week, and I think you'll see some significant changes made. And at the very least, you're going to see a more exciting brand of football this next week from OSU.
I would totally agree to that. And I mentioned Clint Shelf. Hey, can Garrett Rangel become Clint Shelf 2.0, right? Similar speed, similar body types. They have similar type arms. They look alike. I really think in style, I think we would all take a Josh Fields type of quarterback, a guy that just kind of scrambles around to let his receivers get open. Bootlegs, remember Josh Fields would bootleg every now and then, maybe 2 or 3 times a game at a really strategic point to like go get a first down on like a 3rd and 4, something like that. So not necessarily like a running back type of quarterback, but that type of scrambling quarterback that maybe a Josh Fields brought to. I think that would be a good comparison.
Yeah. Well, if he produces, if he acts and plays anything like Josh Fields, then I think everybody will be happy. So
no doubt.
But give him a chance. Give him a chance.
Hey, Coach, we've got just a couple of minutes here. I'm going to go off and watch my Dodgers hopefully beat the Mets tonight. I'm very excited about it. You can see I got my 89ers hat on because Oklahoma City's getting ready to rebrand their AAA ball club. The Oklahoma City is the AAA Dodgers. Tulsa is the AA Dodgers. So that's going to be exciting.
How cool would it be if it was the 89ers again?
I've been yelling from the mountaintops.
Yeah.
It needs to go back to 89ers.
It does.
Okay, Coach, final thoughts here, man.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add other than what I've already said. Is I think that you're going to see a more exciting brand of football come Friday against BYU. That may not produce a win, but I think we're going to see some noticeable changes that everybody's going to be able to be happy about at the end of the game, and it's going to be a more exciting brand of football. I think there's probably been some hard conversations that's happened, and I hope that produces a higher entertainment value that OSU fans have been accustomed to seeing from OSU. And so I'm excited for it, and I think that we might all be surprised. I hope we're at the end of the game. We're like, well, what took us so long to make that change, right?
Because Mike Gundy's stubborn, right?
Yeah, and anyway, that's my thoughts, and I'm excited to kind of missed it this weekend not having OSU football, and excited for it to be back this next week and have an expectation of having a high entertainment value in Provo.
Everybody got to meet my Dodgers dogs. I got 2 pit bulls. The one you just saw right there is Barn. And they know when Daddy's getting ready to go off the air because that means immediately we get to go for a walk. So the Dodgers dogs in the background here are ready for Daddy to take them for a walk. So that means it is time to get off. Coach, this has been a super amount of fun. We are going to do this every single Sunday at 6 o'clock if I have time, or if you have time, or if the world works that way, right? This is still a hobby for us. So spread the word, and let's get a great conversation to go in today. We had a great crowd in the lobby. So, Coach,